Hey guys, it's Mina. In today's episode, my guest Mike Golic Jr. and I are going to discuss the intricacies of the Iowa caucusing process. No, that's a joke. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl. But before we get to the episode, I want to tell you about another great ESPN podcast, That's What She Said, with Sarah Spain. This week, Sarah talks with former paparazzi photographer James Ambler about getting a ride from Angelina Jolie and nearly getting into a fight with Jude Law. You can find That's What She Said with Sarah Spain wherever you get your podcasts. Here's today's show. Oh, damn.
You're good. Your podcast.
No, just play the music.
We're good.
Just keep this. Play the
music.
Keep it all. Well, not go just.
Not go just right. All right.
Just play the music. I hope you kept all of that. Just so you know what I have to work with. Welcome to the Mina and Mike Show featuring Lenny. The only podcast where one of the hosts thinks Shakira's best song is She-Wolf, for obvious reasons. Actually, that might be two people today, because Mike Golic Jr., I hear you're also a big She-Wolf fan.
She-Wolf was the song that defined training camp circa fall 2012 for a young Mike Golic Jr. in the Notre Dame offensive line.
It's clearly a lesser banger. Although I will say, watching the halftime show, I was struck by how many bangers Shakira has. I keep trying to say the word oeuvre and backing out, but I'm going to say it. Her oeuvre is really impressive.
It is remarkable, and you're right. I think the catalog, I was surprised that she was the lead dog on that one, and that she was going so long before we ever saw Jennifer Lopez. But like you said, when your discography is that full of certified slappers, I think we're understanding why.
Well, speaking of lead dogs, Lenny's here with me. I'm back in Los Angeles, and it's been a couple days. Actually, I'm glad we're doing this today, Mike, not just because my brain is no longer certified mush, but I've also had a couple of days to process the Super Bowl, think through kind of what we saw, what it means, what might happen next year. So today we're going to talk just fully about that, and then at the end of the show, you know what? Actually, in the middle of the show, change my mind, we're going to recap our team draft that you and I did. When did we do this? It was like
back in August.
August, right. Naturally, before the season. So before the season, Mike and I drafted teams based on, whether we thought they'd get into the playoffs, how far they would go, yada, yada. So we're going to review that. Just to sum it up, I'll say mistakes were made.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. Although I will be surprised, Mina. I don't want to spoil anything yet. And while I felt good about my overall performance, I gotta say the depth of your success was impressive.
Well, we'll talk about that. We're gonna do that instead of a mailbag today. Thank you so much, as always, for leaving your questions in my iTunes reviews. But we're gonna hit hold on that because, well, it's a long off season, folks. So there's a lot of time to discuss all of that. But first we're just gonna start off by talking about this game. And my notes from the game, Mike, are basically organized into there's 3 quarters and then there's 1 quarter, because it was really 2 different football games. So I thought it might be useful to talk about it chronologically and start with the first 3 quarters. Honestly, it's really like 3.5 quarters. Through the first 3 quarters of this game, what was the most surprising thing to you about what you saw?
I think that probably the pass rush of the 49ers, and we knew it would be successful, but there's being successful and then there's rattling the guy that's the best player in football, and yeah. I think there's a clear difference, and we saw, all right, in what was the strength-on-strength matchup of the game, the Kansas City offense and the Niners defense, it was such a clear fight. And you and I and Dan Orlovsky were all texting a lot during the game, and this was the worst that Patrick Mahomes had looked in quite some time through the first, like you said, 3.5 quarters of this. And I think that was the most shocking part to me, was that he looked downright bad.
Yeah, I asked you guys if you thought he was hurt, which I don't think he was hurt, right? We haven't even heard anything, but the ball just looked so weird coming out of his hand. I mean, I don't think I've seen him bounce passes like that to guys who were open. And then he was also throwing to guys who weren't open. He threw what I think is probably the worst interception of his career. Had a little back and forth with Teddy, my friend Teddy Bruschi, during the game about that, because he was like, Warner made an amazing play, and it's undeniably true. But and of course Pat had pressure bearing down on him. But if you go back and look at the dots, you can see it's not like the Dante Hightower interception from last year, where Hightower, it was strategic, right? Like he baited it into it and then backed it. It was like a disguised coverage. Like there was nothing disguised about this. He just stared him down, sort of. It was just bizarre, even with the pass rush coming. But I think the pass rush, as you said, is a key element of this. Like Pat Mahomes has played under that sort of pressure before, and his pressure numbers, I think, are always a little bit skewed by how long he holds onto the football. But I don't think I've seen, when the pocket collapses like it did in the first 3 quarters of this game, I don't think I've ever seen him respond that way to pressure.
No, and I also think, yes, he's dealt with pressure before, but I think Pro Football Focus counted Nick Bosa had 12 pressures in that game. Like
he was so good. He should have been the MVP, by the way. Through the first 3 quarters, I know we're seeing Deebo Samuel, Jimmy. It really should have been Nick Bosa.
100%. I was the one arguing for Deebo Samuel, but then I heard that statistic. He ate Eric Fisher's lunch the entire day. That was as one-sided a battle as you'll see the entire postseason. I
want to talk about that because we're sort of bleeding into the fourth quarter a little bit. This pass rush had so much success in the first 3 quarters. And then I think you saw later on in the game, Mahomes stepping up a little bit successfully. And at times breaking off scrambles too, right? And it wasn't like he was getting flushed out. Like you saw the Mahomes you usually see, where his pocket movement is so spectacular and he was stepping up. And I was kind of surprised they didn't move Bosa more inside as the game went on and kind of moved him across that offensive line as he was stepping up like that, because, I think that was sort of the story of the Niners defense. They kind of just came to the party with the girl they brought. Is that the expression?
Yep.
They did what they've done all year, right? They played cover 3, a little bit of man early on, not a ton. They rushed 4. There wasn't like a ton of blitzing. And then it all just stopped working at some point.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to start to look at the reason why for that. And I heard our friend Dan Orlovsky getting into it with a couple of guys on Get Up. I forget if it was this morning or the morning before. And I think it was Bart Scott who brought up the idea of being a defender in that moment where they finally started to turn it on in the fourth quarter, because we also saw, in addition to Mahomes scrambling, which is going to create more running for the defensive linemen, you saw them use a little bit more tempo. Obviously, you're down in the Super Bowl and trying to make your way back. And then with such a quick turnaround there, you saw Richard Sherman and others, there were hands on hips. There was clear signs of fatigue in that moment. And so I think that tempo in that spot really stressed that defense in a way that they hadn't been all night.
Well, let's talk about that, Abe. All right, I'm throwing out my structure talking about the first 3 quarters, because I think what the first 3 quarters and what we saw from this defense clearly plays into the final quarter, and I think where they struggled. And as you mentioned, they looked gassed. Because in the first 3 quarters, so the Chiefs come out, and clearly Andy Reid wants a quick passing game to neutralize the Niners pass rush from the jump, right? They weren't running the ball at that first drive. It was like a couple of pitches and screens, and Mahomes was off, by the way. But the Niners, the defense typically gives you the underneath stuff, and that's what the Chiefs were taking for the first 3 quarters. But they've got really, really fast guys, and they were throwing it to running backs, in the backfield as well. And that's tiring. Patrick Mahomes running around like that, pass rushers having to chase after him. That's tiring. Okay? And at a certain point, if you don't have a deep defensive line where you can just kind of rotate guys in and out like the Eagles famously did in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, right? They had that incredibly deep defensive line. Those guys are going to be exhausted. And I think that was one of my biggest errors, Bill, going into this game. Something that I just called you Bill.
Wow.
You
know what?
Wow. Jeez.
Do you want me to leave?
Wow. I don't even know.
Can we get Bill on the line?
This never happened to me before.
No, okay. I'm sure it's not me. It's you. It's whatever.
Okay. So, Mike, I didn't think at all about the lack of depth on this Niners defensive line. And there were tons of injuries, right? Like, I mentioned earlier, DJ Jones is a guy I saw at the Super Bowl who was very good during the regular season. He was rocking around the Super Bowl IR'd, right? Like as good as this Niners defensive line was, as great as that standard pass rush has been once they were all healthy, even once, getting D Ford back, they're pretty thin. And I think that ultimately ended up being the difference in the game for them.
Yeah, and I think you also remember like what the demands are. Like we talk about this all the time. It is so difficult for offensive lines to pass protect 30, 40 times a game. I think Mahomes had 42 attempts in the game. You are just as demanding. Like that's why we see D linemen tapping their helmet all the time, the lesser athletes on the field trying to go against the 5 linemen that have to stay out there the entire time. But it was interesting to see that war of attrition. And you're right, it leads directly to the moment that's like the most hotly contested of this game, right? Like we tend to boil this down to a couple of key moments, but one of them is the drive that helped directly contribute to this. And the war being waged on either side is there a disagreement in, or an obligation, I guess, to the offensive play caller to have that in mind when you get to a critical juncture like this?
Are you talking about the Tyreek Hill pass? Right? Because it feels like there's 2 plays that everyone's talking about. One is the 2nd and 5 to George Kittle. Really, it should be the 3rd and 5 as well. And then the other is the 3rd and 15 to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 2nd and 5, that sequence to George Kittle where it's run on first down and then pass the next 2 downs that everyone seems to be going back and forth on so much. And, then being a quick out, your defense getting back onto the field, et cetera.
Sorry. I want to talk about that. That's a good point. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about sort of the Niners offense, and that really is a debate about Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's, I think, kind of been the big hot topic on the shows this week, right? But before we get to that, I still want to talk about this Niners defense and what happened in the fourth quarter, because everyone gives Kyle Shanahan so much crap for his teams collapsing in these Super Bowls, but it's just as much on the defenses. We just don't talk about it, right? And, Patrick Mahomes scored back-to-back, certainly in Atlanta where Kyle Shanahan didn't even coach the defense, but being the head coach in San Francisco, Mahomes has back-to-back-to-back touchdowns, right? Back-to-back-to-back, yeah, that's right. Yep. And, I think there's 2 things. You're not seeing this on the debate shows. Nobody's really talking about that side of things. I think there are 2 debatable topics, and one is about team building and how the team's assembled, and then the other is about scheme. And I think they are interrelated. Like I said, schematically, the Niners didn't really change what they did at all. Robert Saleh didn't change what he did. On the other side of the ball, you saw, I think, a Chiefs defense that kind of did start changing some of the things they were doing as the game went on. The Chiefs made a few really fascinating adjustments in the fourth quarter. We'll talk about that. But this Niners defense, and one of the things the Chiefs did, Mike, was they started giving their offensive line help, right? That wasn't really until partway through the third quarter when they started chipping. And that's, by the way, when I would have started moving Bosa inside a little bit more and playing more games. But by and large, like the Niners didn't really do anything different. And I think what you saw in the fourth quarter was a secondary that had been bolstered by the pass rush all season long. And at the end of the day, wasn't as good as the front seven.
No, and we talk about how those things are so inextricably linked. And really, you can kind of go back to last year in this one, because we've talked so much about Nick Bosa kind of being that sort of skeleton key that unlocked the potential of this entire group. Because remember, we're not that far from Robert Saleh being a guy who people were calling for his job, right?
Yeah.
That was not that long ago in the recent past. And when you mentioned the inability to adjust in certain situations like that, and the idea of just letting your great players go out and just outgrade everybody else, I immediately thought of Mike McCarthy and what eventually rode him out of town in Green Bay, and Scott Linehan and what eventually was his death knell in Dallas, which was this idea that we have better players than you, and so we're just going to roll the ball out and let our better players do their thing in all this. Like you said, it's the fine line you get to when you get great on great at the Super Bowl level, at the conference championship level, of saying, am I going to adjust for the opponent or am I going to impose my will? And I think the best do some version of both, a la what you just mentioned with the Chiefs. They're not a team that gives their O-line a ton of help during the regular season because of the guy they've got there. But once you started seeing move the pocket throws, once you started seeing a little bit more help for their tackles they've been used to seeing on that one, you went, okay, Andy Reid is willing to swallow his pride and say, we've got to deal with something abnormal here.
Frankly, those are things I thought they should have done earlier in the game. I was texting you about that as well. But yeah, he made those adjustments. And in defense of the Niners, I think this kind of cuts to what I was saying. There is, you can say, well, schematically, maybe they should have moved Bosa inside more. But then, I think they were very concerned about containing Mahomes, right, outside. And you can say, well, maybe they should have played a little bit more man or mixed things up, but they just might not have had the horses to do it. And that, I think, cuts to, well, how this team was built and how there were maybe weaknesses that were masked at times by the fact that they had leads and they weren't, it wasn't a big deal. They didn't have to rush the passer, a ton in the fourth quarter. Bill Barnwell mentioned, he said this the week before the Super Bowl. He was one of the few people who pointed out that the Niners pass rush was actually struggling in the fourth quarter during the regular season. But it just wasn't an issue very often, and then it became an issue in this game. I don't know, like, in terms of bigger picture takeaways about this defense and whether this style of defense can succeed. That's something I want to think through more because, Chris Sims pointed out that this Seattle style defense now has given up leads in fourth quarters in a few Super Bowls. There's the one we shall not speak of involving New England. There's this one. There's the Atlanta one. And you do wonder, like, hey, maybe you can't, like, maybe this style of defense is cover three with a, it's so contingent on talent winning and that pass rush getting home at the end. Maybe that's just not built for Super Bowls unless you really, truly have elite talent at every level.
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to that given the historical context, but I think on the other side, we also have to probably give a little bit of credence to the fact that you saw an uncommon performance, right? Like,
yes.
We acknowledge that Patrick Mahomes might be the most talented quarterback we've seen in God knows how long, like pure talent-wise, since Marino maybe. I mean, an Aaron Rodgers-esque kind of guy. So at some point, someone else is better and doing the thing that he had done well all year. Like Patrick Mahomes with his back against the wall, 3rd and 15 plus, had been one of the most consistent commodities all year. I think his passer rating on 3rd and 15 plus throws this season was 99.9. All other quarterbacks combined were 4.7.
That's so stupid.
It's a disgusting.
He's 13 for 17. I'm seeing it in stats today. 13 for 17 on 3rd and 15. That's so stupid.
And 6 of those went for first downs or touchdowns.
Well, the 3rd and 15 play, I do want to talk about it because that was kind of, the turning point in this game. And I went back and watched. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's a perfect cover 3 beater, but you can say that. You can say, yeah, sure, move the safety or, freeze the cornerback and then Tyreek Hill will be right there and, run a corner. But you have to, every single person involved has to execute that perfectly, right? It's not just, Mahomes placing the ball or Hill shaking off Jimmy Ward and then running the perfect route. I think it was Sammy Watkins who froze Mosley. I want to say Kelsey ran the deep crosser. It was something Patrick Mahomes, I think, told Andy Reid he wanted to run when the game was on the line. I believe I read that somewhere, although that's probably something you always hear after a great play in the Super Bowl.
No, but it was. But like you said, in sort of the benefit of taking a breath, you hear all these stories now about how Mahomes came to the side and they had run a version of that play earlier, and he added something or tagged something on Tyreek Hill's route that they saw earlier and adjusted to. So those are the kind of things that we always kind of gloss over with Mahomes because the arm talent and everything else is so gifted. Like, he saw enough in conjunction with Andy Reid to go ahead and be a part of that conversation.
Do you think Nick Bosa was held on that play?
Mina,
I watched it a few times.
Mina, holding is a hoax. Don't let the liberal media sell you on that one.
There's so little holding called, right? In this, there was no holding, right? I want to say there was no offensive holds in the Super Bowl. Am I right about that?
This was one of the cleanest football games overall. That's why it felt like it was over. I mean, it was over in like 3.5 hours.
So
it was
fast.
insane.
It was great. By the way, I think that if I'm a Niners fan, I'm angrier about this hold than the OPI.
Really?
Yeah, I've watched it a few times. I think it could go either way. I'm not saying... I think both of them, by the way, can go either way. With the OPI, it's more just about precedent and they didn't call this against Rudolph, whatever, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You can be angry about that. But I think ultimately he did it. But and that said, I understand why you're annoyed because it's something they haven't called. With the hold, I would understand. If I was, especially because it was like literally the entire game hinged on this play. But then if they called it, woof. Woof.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's one of those moments where I think more often than not, and I understand the game should be legislated the same from start to finish, certainly all those things, and especially when it's clear and obvious. But in an instance where it's right on the edge like that and you could go 50-50, there is part of me that still says let the guys in the field handle it.
Do you think Patrick Mahomes should have been the MVP in this game?
You know what? I had this back and forth with Dad and Trey on the show, and I said yes. And I understand the argument for Damian Williams of consistency throughout the game.
No, he's not mine. That's not my argument.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, so who would you have picked?
Well, tell me what you're going to say first.
Well, I still say, like, again, it's whatever you mean for MVP. Like, if we remove the performance of Patrick Mahomes in the moments that it mattered the most, then the Chiefs are not winning this game. Like, what he did was so extraordinary in a short period of time, and I get it. The rest of the game was what the rest of the game was, but to be able to turn it on like that, I just feel like that's the performance that will be remembered. That's the performance that defined the game, so it should be the MVP performance.
Kevin Cole at PFF made a great point to me, because yesterday, I tweeted something about how the big box score lie, let me get the exact numbers, is that Mahomes he only ran for 29 yards, right? Because of the kneel downs. He actually ran for 44, and those runs in particular were huge. All of his runs were like critical conversions or, high EPA runs. And I think those can be ignored when you're looking at his statistics in this game, like the first down. And also, that's what the Niners defense was giving him at certain points, and he took it and went above and beyond with it. And I think Kevin pointed out that's why he thought, you have to count those, and then the MVP case becomes a lot clearer. And I think that's completely valid. I mean, his fourth quarter statistics are also, hilarious. But to me, the counter to Mahomes, and I'm not saying he would have won it, but this would have been my 1B to Mahomes' 1A potentially, would have been Chris Jones. Who was, well, and on that note, let's take a quick break. Let's talk about our, playoff draft. And then after the break, let's talk about the Chiefs defense and the Niners offense and Kyle Shanahan and how we feel about the collapse. But first, let's take a quick break. You could be headed to a game or going on an epic road trip. No matter where your travels take you, Marathon can help you get there with quality top-tier gas. Marathon gasolines are formulated with STP additives. They keep your vehicle running at peak performance by optimizing fuel economy, removing those ugly deposit buildups, and reducing emissions. And right now, you can get 5 cents off every gallon every day with Make It Count rewards from Marathon. Plus, you can earn points for additional savings on fuel, airfare, hotels, and more. This is definitely a win-win deal. It's quick and easy to join. Just download the free Make It Count app or go to makeitcount.com/radio. So join the Marathon team and start saving today. This offer is valid only at participating Marathon stations. Remember, wherever your journey goes, it pays to start at Marathon. Marathon, fueling the American spirit. All right, Mike. So in lieu of a mailbag this week, we're going to recap our NFL season draft. You won. You won by a lot, which makes me think I need to redo my point system.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into why I think it's sort of nonsensical. Like, I did pick the two teams that represented in the Super Bowl, so there was a hefty reward for that, but you had 8 playoff teams that you picked.
You took the Niners like 12th, too, or something. Like, that worked out for you big time. But your first pick was the Chiefs, which was a great pick. So I'm just going to read them. You went Chiefs, Rams,
Ooh.
Colts,
Ooh.
Chargers,
Ooh.
Bears.
Ooh.
How did you win this? Vikings, Cowboys, Jags, Falcons. Your team sucks. Texans, Niners, Redskins, Broncos, Bengals, Raiders, Cardinals. You absolutely should not have won this. My point system sucks.
Hey, listen, you can blame yourself all you want. Now, you know what? Now that you've made it like this, I am going to gloat. I whooped your ass in this thing.
All right, I went Patriots, Eagles. I was a lot higher than the Eagles than I should have been. Saints, Packers. Great pick.
I mean, you did pick 4 playoff teams right off the bat, so I can't talk that much.
Browns, Steelers, which didn't work out. Oh, that's Steelers, who could have seen. Panthers, Seahawks, Ravens, Titans, Lions, Jets. Bills, I got lucky. I picked them late. That was my lucky team. And then the Bucks, Giants, Dolphins.
I mean, the Ravens were kind of your lucky team, too. You picked them like 10th.
That's true. So I have how many of the playoff teams? 8?
You picked 8. I picked 4. You picked 8. I just happened to pick the 2 Super Bowl teams.
You should not have won this. Which of the teams, are you looking at your squad right now? Which of the teams do you feel the most embarrassed about drafting and why?
The most embarrassed? Probably the Bears, just because I didn't have any confidence in them going into the season, and I let everyone else talk me into them. Like, I went into that season very questionable about Patrick Mahomes and what he was capable of based on what we saw, but I let the sex appeal of that defense lure me in, and so I picked them over a Vikings team that I think I thought was better and picked to win that division.
Great defenses regress, man. And I mean, that I think brings us to the Niners in some way, because, as we do this for next year, the Chiefs and Niners are favored to come back, which I think is fair. I picked the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl next year. I just think as long as Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid are in place, you cannot pick against the Chiefs. Is that silly?
No, I don't think so. And I pointed this out to people, like, it wasn't like the Chiefs were bad before they got Pat. Like, they've won double-digit games for the last 5 years. They were doing it with Alex Smith and a bunch of different parts around him on this team. They've done it with now 3 different offensive coordinators. Like, this is a competent organization with a head coach and their star quarterback that are on the same page. Hell yeah, I'd bet that team. So, going into next year, they're going to pay Mahomes. What are we looking at? Like 40 a year, 40 plus? Yeah. It's going to be silly. It'll be interesting to see how they structure that, because it's going to be early, of course. Chris Jones is a free agent, and we'll talk about him shortly, what we saw out of him. Kendall Fuller and Bashaud Breeland are up for deals, so they're going to have to rebuild or pay that secondary. But aside from that, they're pretty much set. They're set on offense, at least. Yep, yeah. A lot of young talent, especially their skill talent. Although the Sammy Watkins thing, that weird quote from him about maybe just taking next season off or something.
Oh yeah, Sammy Watkins, by the way, just before, gamer. What a postseason! Huge
gamer. That being said, if he's going to take the year off, I think they can save like $14 million cutting him.
Really?
I mean, it's
Sammy, you just played your way into a contract. Don't take the year off. Jeez. Yeah, if they cut him, I mean.
Yeah,
someone's going to pay him.
Absolutely. Unless I'd be fascinated if he really does decide to take a year off. Like, it's not unprecedented. We've seen other guys do it.
By the way, since we're kind of moving to the Niners defense, but I don't want to leave this unaddressed, because this morning I was looking at the Niners defense, and I was looking at Richard Sherman, and I was trying to see who they had him covering, and he got burnt by Sammy on that one, which not only do people generally not throw in the direction of Richard Sherman, they usually don't throw that particular route, which is kind of interesting to see. Usually you want to get him inside, but he did a pretty nice job with Kelsey all game when he had him.
Yeah, well, and I think that kind of plays into what Sherm's skill set's always been, right? Big, long strider, like a guy that can certainly physically and lengthwise match up, and I think that's why Sammy was kind of a problem, because at the line, when you've got that sort of quickness, we saw, what it did.
Yeah. I mean, they were giving Tyreek Hill, I think I saw somewhere like 6.5 yards, which is the most any wide receiver's gotten all postseason, cushion-wise. And obviously Tyreek ate a lot. The Niners, on the other hand, just to look forward, again, they're the other, I think it's Chiefs and the Niners, and then I want to say the Saints might be the number 3 favorite to return. I don't have the odds in front of me, but the Niners don't have a ton of free agents. Eric Armstead jumps out, Jimmy Ward, but they also don't have a ton of draft picks going into this season. How do you feel about their chances next year?
I think I feel pretty good for a lot of the same reasons, right? Like, because all that talent is going to make it way back. And then offensively, we've made the joke that Kyle Shanahan's probably their best player all year. Deebo Samuel really started to shine. What's Emmanuel Sanders' contract situation? I know they brought him over in the trade midseason.
I think he's got a year left.
So that's still a guy, because if you're telling me you've got Emmanuel Sanders and Deebo Samuel as the basis of your wide receiver core, Deebo Samuel, I think, led all NFL wide receivers in rushing, during the regular season, like that's a pretty solid unit to go with.
He's a free agent.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And then obviously Kittle.
They got to pay him soon. The hot topic, this week has been, do you roll with Jimmy? Just because of the nature of his contract, you can move on from him so easily. I don't think it makes sense, not because I'm a Jimmy Garoppolo truther and I think he's better than everyone thinks or whatnot, but because I just don't think they have a better alternative. I think that this is going to be something that it's going to really inflect the quarterback discussion. I think all offseason is, this time of year, everyone's like, oh, you got to move on and who's out there, whatever. At the end of the day, a lot of guys are just going to go back to their team. I think we're overstating the amount of movement and the, free agents who are available and that kind of thing. Is Teddy Bridgewater really a massive upgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't really think so.
You're not buying in with the hot take that the Bill Barnwell that you clearly wanted on this podcast today espoused on Spain and Company the other night, saying
he espoused it on ESPN Daily first. Yeah.
Listen, I had to try and hurt you the way you hurt me, okay?
I'm calling him Skip Barnwell now because Skip Bayless had the same take. And they played the audio on Get Up this morning. None of the trolliness really came across, I think.
Yeah, God bless Bill for feeding the sports talk machine for 24 hours. That's sweet,
needed
man.
that. We needed that. Well, Bill made a good point, which is that, basically, and I think this transitions us back to the game, when it counted, Jimmy just couldn't hit the open guy under pressure, right? I mean, he wasn't being asked to make these like insane out of pocket plays. He was being asked to pass the ball to an open tight end really twice, and then a receiver in Emmanuel Sanders under some degree of pressure, and he could do it. He was overthrowing a lot in the fourth quarter. And Bill, I think, pointed out for all of Brady's limitations at his age, that is something he can do.
No, absolutely. Listen, I can talk my way into it, especially if there's an idea that there's a quarterback somewhere in this draft that Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch and the Niners were in love with. Because if you were to bring in some sort of aging veteran who could fill in that spot for a couple years and then secure the bridge program with a guy that you in theory like better than Jimmy Garoppolo, there's some room for that in my brain. But I'm kind of with you when it comes to the quarterback carousel for this offseason. I think by and large, with the exception of like Phillip Rivers and Jameis Winston, most of the guys are going to end up staying put.
I think Phillip Rivers is going to retire. I don't know why. I just don't. None of the destinations make sense for him. I think Tennessee would have been the one, and I think they're gonna.
Yeah, they're gonna re-sign him.
All right, let's take a quick break and then get back to the game. Between hitting the gym, eating cleaner, or learning a new skill, there are a lot of ways we can better ourselves in the new year. One of the most important, though, is to start the year off tackling high-interest credit card debt. And Upstart.com is here to help. Upstart is a revolutionary lending platform that offers smarter rates to help you pay off high-interest credit card debt. Upstart goes beyond the traditional credit score when assessing your credit worthiness. They actually reward you based on your education and job history in the form of a smarter rate. Upstart believes you're more than just your credit score. They believe in you. They make it fast, simple, and easy to check your rate. Since it's just a soft pull, it will not affect your credit score. The hard pull happens if you accept the rate. The best part? Once the loan is approved and accepted, most people get their funds the very next business day. The next day. Over 400,000 people have used Upstart to pay off credit cards or meet their financial goals. Free yourself from the burden of high-interest credit card debt by consolidating everything into one monthly payment using Upstart. See why Upstart is ranked number 1 in their category with over 300 businesses on Trustpilot. And hurry to upstart.com/Mina to find out how low your Upstart rate is. Checking your rate only takes a few minutes. That's upstart.com/Mina. So, Mike, you mentioned the New York's hottest club is, you mentioned the most widely debated play of the game is the 2nd and 5 to, it was supposed to be to George Kittle. And the topic of debate is whether or not Kyle Shanahan should have run the ball there. Whether or not he should have run the ball, I think, more in the fourth quarter in general. Before we get started, I want to go through exactly how the fourth quarter played out, because I think it's worth actually like setting the table and explaining how many opportunities they actually had to throw the ball versus running or whatnot. So bear with me for a moment. I'd like to kind of walk through this because I think I don't know, it's just something that
I think the context matters, absolutely.
Well, especially if we're going to debate this run versus pass thing. Okay, so going into the fourth quarter, they're up 20-10, right? So really we're talking about 3 drives. So at the beginning, or 4 drives, pardon me. The last one you don't really count, obviously, when they're down. So first drive, 12 minutes left. The Niners are up 20-10. Mostert rips off a 6-yard run. Garoppolo hits Kittle for 12. Nobody's angry because it worked, and that's how things work. Mostert runs for 1 yard. It's 2nd and 9. Jimmy Garoppolo checks into a pass here. Okay, important context. He misses to Debo. Then it's 3rd and 9. There's a false start. Then you're not running. Okay, they punt. Right?
Yep.
So you can kind of throw that drive out the window. Here's the key drive in question. And I think this is the only drive, because this is the following drive, you're down to 2.5 minutes. Now you could run then, you could, but really there's one drive, I think, where there's optionality. Yeah,
like I say, that drive people will point out they had all their timeouts remaining, you could run, but I'm with you. I think it's the middle drive in question that really has some validity.
So I think also that's worth pointing out. We're talking about a single drive here. Okay. Like that's not choker stuff, but whatever. 1st and 10, Mostert runs 5 yards.
It's 20-17 at this point, by the way,
20-17, yes. 20-17, yes. And the Niners are relevantly at their own 25. So we're not in 4-down territory. I think that also matters.
Yep.
Here's a key 2nd and 5. We've talked about this a million times. You and I have. It's the pass to Kittle, who somehow, they get him on Terrell Suggs, which is, I think if you probably couldn't pick a better possible matchup for George Kittle. Chris Jones, who I earlier said I thought should have been 1B for MVP, he's just trying to stop the run here. Or, he's just trying to fill the gap. He's getting double teamed. He's well blocked, by the way. Garoppolo sees Kittle, slant. Jones gets his paw up. Incredible play, incredible timing. Yes, he's very tall. Knocks it down. Now, people pointed out he had Debo in the flat to his right. Sure, that would have been, a pass also. But it's also worth noting there were like 300 Chiefs, 8, at the line. Like, they had a massive numbers advantage here. Not massive, but this was not a running situation. Like, do you think there's a case to be made that Kyle Shanahan should have run the ball there?
So I think in general, and I've gone back and forth on this just because it's not, to me, with it's Kyle Shanahan, it's not normal rushing the football. Like, this isn't the Tennessee Titans who are just a battering ram Derrick Henry into. This is the most creative running in pro sports outside of the Baltimore Ravens. And so I think when it comes to that, there's a different level of confidence I afford to Kyle calling a run in that situation. That being said, you're right. Numbers were there and they dictate all these things. And I am kind of sick and tired, and I saw some people tweeting this at you and Dan the other day, acting like this idea that Chris Jones is some sort of martial artist with this perfect timing who can bat these balls out of the sky with the ease, of coming down in your stance. Timing and batting a ball down is really freaking hard. It is a really difficult thing to do. Even if you understand the ball is going to come out quick, all these different things, timing that and doing that in space is really hard. So yes, it was an excellent play by Chris Jones, and it shouldn't be trivialized and act like it's something that normal people can accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, so what, you never throw it inside when Chris Jones is on the football field? Yeah. If that's the case, Chris Jones should make $300 million a year. Like, I mean, if he completely can take away all slants,
middle of the field belongs to Chris Jones.
He's a great player, but like, that's just nonsense. I mean, it's great. I tweeted this. It's like the Butler play in the Super. I
was proud of you for going to the well on that one. I mean, that's
you can't see right now. I'm doing the Shakira thing with my tongue. Nobody wants to give credit to Malcolm Butler. Everyone just wanted to crap on Pete Carroll and Darrell Bevell. That was an amazing play. People hate giving credit to defensive players. Why is that?
I don't know. Chris Jones, no fly zone. We're giving him the credit.
If there was a fantasy for, if I know an IDP, here people like, shut up. Yeah. Anyways, get off my lawn. I think your point about Kyle Shanahan and like what they had accomplished in the run game is it's reasonable, and I think it colors this conversation, right? Because any other offense in the NFL, nobody's saying you got to run 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 5. It's because of how good they've been, and how good they had been with Deebo Samuel in particular. And I think there's a case to be made that they should have gotten him the ball a bit more in the fourth quarter, because that reverse seemed to be unstoppable at times. Yeah. So the 3rd and 5, by the way, he tried to hit Bourne. It looked like a miscommunication. Kittle was open again, right? But so really those are their 2 plays in the game where I think you can argue, maybe you should have done something different. But the idea that it's choking is absurd, right? Like we're talking about debatable, maybe a reverse to Samuel would have worked there, but like you're gonna blame Kyle Shanahan for Garoppolo not hitting to open receive. It just doesn't compute to me. Now, you can kill him for the end of half stuff.
Yep.
We can talk about that later, but
field goal.
Yeah, just the play calling. I mean, Garoppolo, he collapsed under pressure in the fourth quarter. I don't really know. The Chiefs made a couple of outstanding defensive plays. I thought Steve Spagnuolo, no one's really talking about this, did an amazing job making some adjustments in the fourth quarter. But I think he rightly saw what was going on with Garoppolo. I mean, you saw the screenshot where he's like closing his eyes.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was 1 for 9 under pressure.
Well, and I think
yikes.
I mean, and that is worth noting in all this, but it's also worth noting to the point of why you pass it twice in that situation. This had not been the 49ers call sheet from the last run of playoff games, right? Like they had been throwing those quick play action shots the entire game. Game flow was different for this one. The plan was different for this one. You had plenty of success in that area, throwing quick play action towards the middle of the field. And so it wasn't far-fetched in that point to say what had been successful for us today, not what had been successful for us in the NFC title game or the divisional round. What had worked today would be my biggest argument in that situation for also why, all right, I could see him calling passes in that spot.
Let's hear your take on this, because this is something Bill and I talked about. I know, Mina, stop talking about Bill. Which is that these play action quarterbacks, Tannehill, Cousins, Garoppolo, they all kind of got exposed in the playoffs this year, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that means that more teams should continue to do it. But, when there's been moments too where Garoppolo, I think, even outside of in obvious passing situations, he has succeeded in the past. But it's undeniable that he is greatly aided by optionality and the way Kyle weaves together the run and pass games. And when that goes out the window a little bit, it's hard, and it's something that I also think defenses can make adjustments to. I didn't realize during the game, Mike, how easy he had it, how open guys were. I mean, I saw that it was like almost entirely play action. At one point he was like 11 for 12 or something, off of play action, which is frankly hilarious. But, so NFL Next Gen Stats, they do that plus minus stat where they do the expected completion percentage and then how much quarterbacks produce above it based on, chipping the players. Kyle gave Jimmy an expected completion percentage of 70% in this game. And he was minus 5.3, which is really, really, really bad.
Wow.
Like, he was, bowling with bumpers.
Well, and so I remember looking this up before the game because both of these teams, schematically and with the talent of some of the wide receivers, tend to major in throws that look relatively open. And Next Gen Stats, I think, defines wide open throws as 5 yards of separation at the time of catch. No one had a higher yards per attempt on wide open catches than the San Francisco 49ers, which indicates, a lot of these are deep play action shots. A lot of these are very well set up by your offense and that. And I remember you and I had a conversation about play action. Like, if it works so well, why don't you run it all the time? And there's a bunch of reasons, when you're under center especially, which tends to be the bulk of them, you've got to turn your back to the defense. And with a lot of great quarterbacks, they'd rather have eyes on certain spots. But the word you just used there to describe offense to me can apply to a skill set. Like, if you don't have optionality in your skill set, meaning you just don't have the ability to do other things, when you get to the highest level like this, you're right. People can game plan and expose you. If you can only do one thing, even if that thing is, by any analytically driven measure, the most effective thing to do, you can still only do one thing. And when you can do that, these defensive coordinators spend their entire lives, every waking moment, figuring out ways to do this. These are the best guys in the world. So, yeah, eventually, even if the thing you do is the preferred medium, you're still a one-trick pony, and that doesn't fly when you're playing in the damn Super Bowl.
I pulled up the next gen stats. His completed air yards per attempt was 4.7, which is real low. Probably would have won MVP. And look, he was good. Like, Garoppolo, I think, deserves credit. He's the thing about being one of those like kind of play action type quarterbacks. So you gotta obviously be accurate over the middle of the field, especially in the intermediate area. But he also is very, very good. And I think this factors into sort of the discussion we had earlier on what San Francisco should do, if anything. They're not going to do anything, everybody. So this is a massive waste of time. But he's really good at placing the ball where receivers can get yards after catch.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. How many times have we seen, Emmanuel Sanders or Kendrick Bourne or whoever catch like a 7-yard slant and turn it into 12? I don't know. And so he deserves a ton of credit for that. But he's bad under pressure. I don't think how you can deny that that's like a massive ding on his ability at this point.
No, and I think part of it too is also like time under task, right? Like relative to his football life cycle, Jimmy Garoppolo has not been at this a long time, and based on the way they'd operated as a team, like I think Jimmy Garoppolo to an extent, and listen, he's a pro. This is how you're all expected to operate. So when I say this, don't freak out. Like, we wouldn't treat any other position the same. When your number's called, you're told to answer the bell. But Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball 25 times in the playoffs leading up to this. Like, he was not asked to use his arm a lot. And then you get to the most important game of the season. And as we mentioned, the game flow changes that a little bit. You're asked to do a little bit more. And you're expected to. They paid you handsomely to do so. But it's still not something, again, you hear players say this all the time, time under task. You haven't spent a lot of time under task being forced to pure drop back pass to do some of the things that he ultimately failed in.
Was Chris Jones the one who got he on the Sanders overthrow? Trying to remember who got pressure on that one. I thought he should have hit that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And wasn't that the one that they showed the video after of Kyle on the sideline next to John Lynch?
Oh no. Oh, that's brutal. Yeah. I mean, he had him. And, a lot of other quarterbacks at that, like the quarterbacks who are all above him hit that throw, right? It's kind of.
I mean, we talked about this. It was the side by side of Patrick Mahomes hits the throw to Tyreek, hits the throw to Sammy Watkins that we talked about on Sherman before. He hits his shots. And Garoppolo doesn't. Andy Reid goes for it twice on 4th down, and Kyle Shanahan kicks the field goal. Like in these key situations that ultimately decide games like this, one side was all gas, no brakes, and hit their mark, and the other side folded.
I was so mad at Andy Reid when I thought he wasn't going to go for it because I was watching from home. And then I saw all my friends on Twitter saying, they're setting up the field goal unit. And I was screaming and tearing my hair out. And then when he changed his mind, I just, like a sense of calm came over me. Honestly, like a warm glow, like people talk about when they have like an out of body experience and like a benevolent spirit. And I felt like a mind meld with him in that very moment. Chiefs had attempted, I want to say the fewest, 10 the entire year. But what about when you just do it to 3/4? It's still low, I think, but it probably goes down a bit, right? Because that's skewed by situation. You got to just look at the first.
No, 100%. And they converted 6 of 10, so like they were good at it when they did it. Their play calling on 4th down was awesome.
How about the? Yes, it was awesome. Was one of the 4th down conversions the one where that was the touchdown where Anthony Sherman led, where he just told Williams to follow him.
Yes, that was the touchdown.
That was really pretty. They did a lot of cool stuff with the run game in this one. They ran the ball a lot more than but that was entirely the product of what the Niners were giving them on defense, which
definitely
is what good
Mahomes speed option.
Who has been saying that? Okay, so I was wrong about many, many things in this game, but I believe if you listen to this very podcast last week, there's a point where I tell Warren Sharp I really hope they run the option with Mahomes at the goal line because this San Francisco 49ers defense had struggled with that all year. They struggled against Kyler Murray. I'm pretty sure Lamar Jackson had a successful zone read at the goal line too. Now Mahomes he got walloped, but it worked. Yeah, that was great. Well, on one hand, you had Andy going for it, being a baller. On the other hand, you had Kyle kicking the field goal. Let's wrap up by talking about the end of half thing, because like I said, I think that's really the thing you can dig him on. Although the more time I've spent thinking about it, the more I think it's not as bad as people thought.
Oh, really? Now, I'll be interested to hear your reason, because I heard one reason that I can kind of vibe with, and so I want to know if it's the one you're going for.
All right, so for those who forgot, the Chiefs stopped the Niners, the Niners stopped the Chiefs with 1:45. That's where you thought, okay, let's save 40 seconds, right? 1:45 down to 59. And you can see John Lynch, a.k.a. Wes Welker, making the timeout gesture. So they don't. And and this all matters. They ran the ball. Mostert gains 3 yards. Let's see. Okay. They don't use a timeout on their first 2 plays. Then they got the big play on 3rd down. It's sorry, I'm making sure I got this right.
Well, is the 3rd down play, was that the Kittle play?
That's the Kittle play.
Got it.
Wait, no. Sorry. Jeff Wilson catches the pass out of the backfield. Sorry, I'm all discombobulated. Then you get the 42-yarder to Kittle, which is really, by the way, beautiful pass by Jimmy Garoppolo. But yeah,
dime.
Best pass he threw of the game. And then it's, an OPI or whatever. And like I said, how you feel about that really comes down to how you feel about precedent, in my opinion. So afterwards, I said, wait, I had like a flashback to the Ravens game. I was like, I feel like Kyle did like this exact same thing against the Ravens. So then I go back and I want to see what he says about it afterwards, how he's defending it. And, he said that, they wanted to push it only after a minute, because he didn't want to give the ball back to the other offense. And much like the Chiefs, the Ravens have a very good offense. And it was interesting to me because I realized, okay, like this is just as much, if not more, about Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes than it is about an absence of faith in his own offense. And then when I started thinking about it that way, Mike, it kind of made sense to me. I think we're looking at it so much through, well, he should have had faith in his offense and he should have known Mahomes wasn't playing well and but Shanahan was using the information from like the entire season. He wasn't thinking about like, okay, Mahomes has struggled this game. He's not going to score here. And when you think about it, like it is reasonable that he thought if they failed, Patrick Mahomes could come down the field and score.
And I think especially with that line of thinking, and Tim Hasselback pointed this out to us, that had the Chiefs in another world made the right play there, it was botched by the special teams unit, but that ball should have been down pretty deep within their territory. So if you're talking about that potential of being backed up, and they were still deep in their own territory wherever they started at, so I don't know. I guess I can understand it. Like, and you're right. It's like one of those consistent things like blackjack. Like if you hit or stay on 16, just do it all the time. Like the fact that he's consistent with it, and that's a general philosophy for them, I guess is a little more defensible, but I don't know, man. I think I'm still kind of in the mode of like, you know what, even if you are worried about the other side, or even if, understandably you don't have all the faith that Jimmy Garoppolo is built for that moment, like, do you not have faith in the fact that you're Kyle Bleep and Shanahan? Like, maybe I have so much confidence in Kyle that I assume he can conquer the world,
Also, and this feels like a thing that is much easier to say with hindsight. Your defense is playing really, really well. You should have thought this is going to be harder for my defense as the game goes on.
Yeah.
Right now, we're crushing it. And maybe this is a lesson in Super Bowl, is like, you gotta start thinking about these defenses in fourth quarters and how they're built and everything we talked about at the beginning of this. And I think at that point, his offense and his offense, one, you're Kyle Shanahan, you should be able to, we've seen you do this. You've seen you call like these incredible 2-minute drills. And then two, you should also have faith in your defense to make the stop. And three, you got to get the points against the Chiefs. You got to take them. Like, you can't let your foot off the gas pedal. And that applies to, of course, the field goal as well. This isn't going to be a 10-10 game. This isn't going to end 17-10, 13-10. It's going to get worse, right? So
yeah, well, and I think you said
can't
this.
turtle up.
I think you said this leading up to the game, right? Like, these teams need to come out and throw haymakers early. Like, you can't be passive in this game in the way.
Yep.
And certainly that was more criticism of the Chiefs, who had taken all these early, deficits in all of their playoff games leading up to this. But I think you could say the same for the Niners in key points there. Like, this is not a game to save your bullets for late.
He was protecting his defense. And that was not the time to protect them. I think that's how I feel, right? Like, he was coaching like he wanted to keep Mahomes off the field and wanted to do whatever it took, points, not worrying about getting his own points. And I think that was a mistake.
Yeah, I think and I think you phrased it perfectly there. And maybe you can call this strategy, but I would call it maybe like inconsistent aggression, right? Like, we're rewarding it in these instances down the stretch where he's got the gall to throw it in a situation where it's contested, but then you get to the field goal situation, you get to the end of the half, and all of a sudden that's where you choose to turtle in this is something that I think when you've got those other things happening side by side in the game becomes a little confusing to me.
Speaking of inconsistent aggression, got a question from Lenny coming up, but first, we're going to take a quick break. They say it takes 2 months to form a habit. And if you're making a resolution this year, that can feel like a long time to wait to see results. With Calm, all it takes is 5 minutes a day to feel better, calmer, and ready to face whatever this year throws at you. Calm is the #1 app for sleep, relaxation, and meditation. Calm has sleep stories, which are like bedtime stories for adults. They help you fall into a deep, natural sleep in minutes. And stories are narrated by iconic voices like LeVar Burton and Nick Offerman. They also have soothing music from artists like Sam Smith, guided meditations, breathing exercises, and so much more to keep you relaxed and distressed. And if you go to calm.com/Mina, you'll get a limited time offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription, which includes hundreds of hours of programming. Over 60 million people use Calm. Join them today to accomplish your goals tomorrow. For Mina Kimes Show listeners, Calm is offering a special limited time promotion of 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/Mina. That's 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library, and new content is added every week. Get started today at calm.com/Mina. That's calm.com/Mina.
And now it's time for Dinks and Dunks. I'm getting paid for this, right?
All right. As always, we're going to do 5 questions, 4 from me, 1 from Lenny. But first, I want to let you guys know, I'm going to take a break next week. I think it's the first break since I started the show. But I will be back the following week with new episodes. We will talk about the draft a lot, talk about the off season. But yeah, just a quick break. All right. First question. Who is a non-Chiefs Niners team that you would take if we do this draft, the playoff draft again, you would take first?
Wow.
Think it through.
You know what? I'll go Baltimore.
We should do it again.
I'll go Baltimore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Baltimore will be good.
There, by the way, I know you mentioned it earlier. Odds for next year, Baltimore is right behind Kansas City. They're 7-1. Kansas City 6.5-1, depending on where you are.
Interesting. I feel like the Saints are too high. All right. Question 2. Around the Horn is on the television in front of me. Woody Page is wearing a denim jacket and a t-shirt. What kind of jacket would you like to pull off this year?
Leather. Mina, I have been flirting for so long with buying a leather jacket, and all my 2 concerns are, A, I don't think I'm cool enough to pull it off, and B, my God, how sweaty and hot that's going to be.
You could get like one of those very like thin ones, you know what I mean? That like aren't, not like a bomber with the big collar and a lot of pockets. More like that sort of like sleek look.
I think that's what I have to try. I think, you know what? This is the year I'm going to do it. I'm tired of dancing around it. This is going to be the impetus.
Question 3. Super Bowl this year was in Miami. I thought it was great, honestly, as far as Super Bowl cities go. Next year is Tampa. What's an American city that's never had a Super Bowl that you'd like to see get one? Oh wait, let me phrase that, because then you're gonna actually have to do work and look up where all the Super Bowls were. Pick a city that doesn't have to have a football stadium, and it's anywhere in the world. Where would you think a fun place to have a Super Bowl would be?
Oh wow. You know what? I will pick a place that does have a stadium. It's just a collegiate stadium. Let's shift it over. Instead of doing it at the Superdome in New Orleans, let's do it in Baton Rouge. I want a Super Bowl in Death Valley. Just that's a great idea. This big, insane swamp. The tailgate scene there is legendary. It would be, Mina, when I tell you it's the single hardest stadium I've ever had to get in and out of traffic-wise in my life, I'm not kidding you. So that would be hellish, but it'd be worth it to see people pull up on those fan boats.
That's a great pick, actually. And it's warm, and I kind of like sort of smaller ones, right, where everything's a little bit more compressed, so I like that one. Question 4. It's draft season, baby. You ready? You ready for draft Twitter? You ready for the draft show? You ready for all that? All right. I saw Justin Herbert at Radio Row. First of all, he's not 6'6", which in my book, as you know, is a huge plus. Because I've seen his height all over the place, and you know how I feel about 6'6" quarterbacks. Too tall. I don't think he's 6'6". How high do you think he's going to go?
So in Todd McShay's latest mock draft 2.0 that came out as of the recording of this podcast, he had him going 13th to Indianapolis. I feel like that kid's going to sneak into the top 10. Because it
happens every year.
I also think we're going to end up drafting like Jordan Love and Jacob Eason are probably going to sneak into the back end of the first round. Like they're like from there on down, from Herbert on down are the guys that are going to blow everyone away at the combine because they have howitzers attached to their arm, and then everyone's going to fall in love and ruin their lives over them.
Jacob Eason has a lot of Josh Allen-ish qualities.
Oh. So I was going to say, you watch a fair amount of UW football, and obviously this year didn't give you a ton of great stuff, but what did you make of him? Because I've only seen a strong arm and limited sample size. I haven't seen much else.
He's toolsy. You're going to hear that approximately 3,000 times before now in the draft. Tools, arm talent. We're going to hear a lot about his arm talent. It's the other stuff that, I don't think he's a terrible prospect. I definitely think he's worth taking a swing on, but he's far from a finished product.
Where are you at on like the personality stuff? Everyone calling him an introvert, talking about that as like a negative quality.
Yeah, I don't know. I never know what to weigh in on that stuff, I mean, for Kyler Murray's kind of an introvert, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, Rosen's the one that always gets batted around, but none of that would have mattered if he played well.
True.
Yeah. Last question, as always, comes from Lenny. Mike, Lenny followed you on Twitter recently.
Ooh.
Yeah. He's not going to put his handle out there in the public.
He's not going to tell me.
Yeah. Anyways, he noticed you tweet a lot about The Bachelor because you use hashtag The Bachelor. In the last 24 hours, you've written 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think that's it. Nope. 13, 14, 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
17.
Oh, this is a wake-up call.
18 tweets about The Bachelor. He just wants to know what you're thinking there.
You know what I'm not thinking, and I'm clearly just trying to push away the people closest to me. I'm clearly trying to bring down my already meager follower count in comparison to Mina, and I'm sure Lenny now, even though he won't tell me what his Twitter handle is, and I'm pretty sure Bill Barnwell knows.